If you've never been to Winnipeg before, there are a few things that will probably surprise you. Some in a good way, some maybe not. Because Winnipeg, it's one of the strangest mixes of modern, old, interesting, quiet, affordable, and sometimes honestly a little confusing. And after spending time here again, I honestly think most people misunderstand this city completely. Because Winnipeg doesn't really try to impress you right away, but the longer you spend here, the more interesting the city becomes. And honestly, by the end of this trip, there was one thing about Winnipeg that completely changed the way I look at this city. One of the first things that surprises people about Winnipeg, it's how different the place feels compared to bigger Canadian cities. It feels calmer, less rushed, less intense. And honestly, depending on who you are, that's either going to feel refreshing or kind of boring. Because Winnipeg definitely doesn't have that non-stop energy you get in places like Toronto or Vancouver. But I also think that's part of the city's identity. It feels more practical, more grounded, and honestly, more real. If you come here expecting massive tourist attractions and dramatic scenery everywhere, you're gonna probably be disappointed. But if you come here expecting an actual everyday Canadian city with character, Winnipeg becomes a lot more interesting. Downtown Winnipeg was honestly one of the more interesting parts of the city for me, because visually, it almost feels like multiple different cities mixed together. One minute you're walking past older historic buildings full of character, and then suddenly you're surrounded by newer glass towers and modern plazas. And then 5 minutes later, you're on a street that feels surprisingly quiet again. And honestly, that contrast, it's everywhere downtown. One thing I actually like is that Winnipeg seems to preserve a lot of its older architecture instead of replacing everything with glass towers. So even though parts of downtown feel older, it also gives the city more personality. Even places like Union Station still give downtown Winnipeg that older historic character that a lot of newer cities have completely lost. And honestly, I think preserving some of that older architecture makes the city feel more memorable. It feels less polished, less manufactured, more authentic. And what's interesting is that some of these buildings downtown are over 100 years old. Honestly, Winnipeg feels like one of those cities where people judge before they actually visit it. What's a city you completely change your opinion on after seeing it in person? Either way, better than expected or honestly way worse. If there is one area that probably changes people's impressions of Winnipeg the fastest, it's this part of the city. Because visually, this area actually feels pretty unique compared to a lot of Canadian downtowns. Between the river, the bridge, the museum area, and some of the older architecture nearby, this is probably one of the most photogenic parts of Winnipeg. And honestly, this is where the city starts feeling more memorable. Not because it's flashy, but because it actually has a distinct personality. And once you actually go inside the Forks Market, the atmosphere changes quite a bit. Because compared to some of the quieter streets downtown, this is one of the few places that really feels like a central gathering spot in the city. There's food, local shops, people hanging out, and honestly, it's probably giving the clearest sense of Winnipeg's personality in one place. It's not trying too hard, it's not flashy, but it feels authentic. And honestly, this whole area, it's probably where Winnipeg started making the most sense for me. One thing Winnipeg does feel like though is practical. Compared to cities like Vancouver or Toronto, everything here feels a little more manageable. Parking feels easier, traffic feels less stressful, and overall, the city just feels more accessible financially than a lot of major Canadian cities. Now, Obviously, every city has gotten more expensive lately, but Winnipeg still feels more realistic for everyday life than a lot of places people are moving to right now. And honestly, I think Winnipeg is one of those cities where your experience depends almost entirely on your expectations before visiting. Do you think cities get judged too much online before people actually experience them for themselves? Because Winnipeg honestly feels like a perfect example of that. And if you like honest travel videos like this, cities, hotels, places that are actually worth visiting, or sometimes maybe not worth visiting, that's what pretty much this channel is about. Real travel experiences, honest opinions, helpful information, and exploring places that are genuinely interesting, from major cities to places people probably don't talk about enough. So if that sounds like your thing, definitely consider subscribing because there are a lot more videos coming. So after spending time in Winnipeg again, what's my honest opinion? I think Winnipeg is probably way more interesting than most people expect. Not because it's flashy, not because it's trying to impress anyone, but because the city actually feels authentic. And in a weird way, that's what makes Winnipeg memorable. It's probably not a city everyone will fall in love with, but I also think it's a city most people judge too quickly. And honestly, that's the thing about Winnipeg that changed my opinion the most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.